Across Surrey and North East Hampshire, good morning. It's 6 o'clock. It's Monday, the 16th of April. BBC Surrey Breakfast with James Cannon and Leslie McCabe.
Good morning. Our top story. Plans to sell off hospital buildings in Epsom and raise more than £20 million have been described as worse than selling off the family silver. NHS bosses say it isn't possible to convert or rebuild the sites so they can treat patients and want to sell them to fund major repairs. Last year, they called for a new £300 to £400 million unit at Epsom St Helier or Sutton Hospital. But campaigners like Sandra Ash from the Keep Our St Helier campaign group is against the proposals.
It's not a question of selling off the family silver. This isn't some frippery. This is the basic structure of our health service that is being sold off. They are not making any more land.
Theresa May will tell MPs this afternoon that she ordered RAF jets to take part in airstrikes in response to the alleged chemical weapons attack on a rebel-held town in Syria. Now, our top story this morning. Hospital buildings at Epsom aren't up to scratch, so should land be sold off to fund repairs and new facilities?
If you can't actually fix windows, why is it that you can actually sell off parts of the building? How can you install a supermarket?
Well, now there are plans to sell off buildings at Epsom Hospital to pay for more than £20 million of repairs. NHS bosses say it isn't possible to convert or rebuild the sites so that they can treat patients, but campaigners aren't happy with the proposals.
My name's Eileen Smith. I was a nurse over 50 years ago at Epsom Hospital, so that's why I've been taking an interest. I really enjoyed my work here because I think at the time we had a reasonable number of staff, and as a qualified nurse, it's always nice to be able to give the proper care, the good care. And I feel that nurses now are under that pressure that they can't always give that care. And that's because they've been cutting the GDP that goes to the National Health Service. Some years ago, the health service was always in need of money, but since then there has been this policy. It's a deliberate attempt to push people into privatisation.
And what do you make of this idea of selling off hospital buildings and land?
I think that's an absolute disgrace because as a taxpayer, we have all paid for the National Health Service from its very beginning. For nearly 70 years, we've been paying tax. That land belongs to the whole people. It does not belong to an individual hospital. They have no right whatsoever, and it's totally unethical to sell off that land. We can use it for the purposes of our population.
Daniel Elkerlees is the chief executive of the NHS Trust that runs Epsom and St Helier hospitals. So, Daniel, can you explain what it is that you've decided to do exactly?
Yes, good morning. So we've spoken before about the decades of underinvestment in our buildings at both Epsom and St Helier, and about our 2020 to 2030 plan, which says we'd really like to secure £400 million of government money to build a new critical care hospital for our sick patients. But we have to get between now and then. And I'm really pleased to be able to tell everybody that we've now secured £100 million worth of investment in the next few years to bring up to a safe level of building and to improve the environment for quite a lot of our patients, for a huge number of the buildings that we have at both Epsom and St Helier.
So what exactly will you be doing?
So everything from replacing the windows that won't open to getting rid of all the steam power that we have at both Epsom and St Helier, refurbishing quite a lot of the wards. We showed one of your colleagues around Epsom last week and showed her our brand new paediatric outpatient department, the brand new maternity department, and we went and asked the staff, what's it like working here? And they said, this is so much better than it was before because we have things like windows in the consulting rooms. In the consulting rooms where the kids are seen, there's now enough space to have play equipment.
And when was it that you actually got the money?
Just a few weeks ago. We've been asking for quite a long time to say we need a very large investment programme in Epsom and St Helier in the here and now to cope with this very large backlog of critical infrastructure maintenance that we have. And I'm really pleased that we've secured £100 million. And all of the money is to be spent on improving the buildings in Epsom and St Helier.
And does that mean then that you're dropping the plans for a new A&D unit?
Absolutely not. No, we're still going as hell for leather or as quickly as we can to convince everyone in the NHS that it's the right thing to do so that we can do a public consultation. I'm hoping at some point in the financial year we're now in on which is the best site. To do the public consultation, we now have to have an in-principle agreement that the money, the £400 million, is actually there. So there's a lot of work going on to make sure Epsom St Helier is right up the top of the list of good candidates for new hospital buildings.
Well, campaigners say that these sites don't belong to the trust, that they've been paid for and belong to the public. So should you be doing this?
So we think we should, because the land that we have declared surplus at Epsom, following our board meeting on Friday, has things in it like a house that is vacant, an accommodation block which has been condemned so no one can use it. It will have in it the building that has the steam boilers, and when we re-provide it with a combined heat and power plant, that goes in the basement of one of the buildings, so we don't need that building. It's got a prefabricated old ward, which is now just used for some outpatients, which we're going to move, some pretty grotty accommodation, and some office space, which is just not fit for purpose. And so getting the permission to say you can declare this land surplus, and the first buyers of that would be the public sector, if the public sector, if any institution in the public sector would like it, but all the money that we raise from that gets reinvested back in Epsom Hospital. So we think that's the right thing to do, because the places we're going to invest the money are the places where our patients are cared for, and we're going to bring up some accommodation where patients are seen which isn't great to something which will be completely acceptable and fit for purpose for the 21st century.
Now, you were a senior manager at Charing Cross Hospital in London when major cuts were announced a few years ago, and the campaigners are worried that there'll be a similar situation at Epsom and St Helier. Are they right?
So I've never managed at Charing Cross. I worked for the commissioning part of the NHS in North West London, and actually I said at our board meeting on Friday, when looking at Epsom and St Helier's A&E performance, which is pretty good, actually we're now third in the pecking order in London, because Chelsea and Westminster has done slightly better than us, and that's because of some of the work I did in my previous job of securing them an awful lot of money to build a fantastic new A&E facility at Chelsea and Westminster. So I'm now trying to do exactly the same thing for us in Epsom and St Helier.
And do you have to consult the public to make all these decisions?
So we don't have to consult the public to do the land sale. There's a prescribed process on how to do that. We would clearly have to consult the public, and the commissioners would consult the public if we're talking about building the £400 million new acute specialist facility.
And the campaigners are saying if this goes wrong, people's lives will be put at risk. The stakes are very high, aren't they?
So the stakes are high, but I think if we don't do the work on repairing and restoring the buildings we want to use at both Epsom and St Helier now, actually care will get worse, because the buildings will get worse. And we have so many examples of people having to do extraordinary things to keep patients safe that mean they're not focused all the time on providing great care. And you should just see the happy staff when they get to work in an environment which is fit for purpose. You know, it was palpable showing Rebecca around last week and talking to the nurses in paediatrics and maternity about how much better their environment was. And happy staff clearly make for good patient care.
Well, thank you very much for your time this morning. That's Daniel Elcleys, Chief Executive of the NHS Trust that runs Epsom and St Helier Hospitals.
Well, last year, NHS bosses called for a new multi-million-pound unit at Epsom St Helier or Sutton, saying that many services aren't clinically or financially sustainable. Now they're planning to sell off buildings at Epsom Hospital to pay for more than £20 million of repairs. But campaigners aren't happy with what's being proposed. Sandra Ash is from the Keep Our St Helier group. She doesn't believe it's the right way to fund an upgrade to services.
It's not a question of selling off the family silver. This isn't some frippery. This is the basic structure of our health service that is being sold off. They are not making any more land. And in our area, we have fewer beds than the rest of England, and England has fewer beds than the rest of the developed world. And they're selling the land and buildings so that when the population grows by the predicted 24%, we will have even fewer beds. they're intending to reduce our bed numbers by at least a third in this area that is already failing to hit all the A&E standards, all the ambulance waiting times. People are already dying. At one time in January, there was a queue of 300 people waiting for ambulances to get them into St Helier Hospital. That's an indicator of how bad it is now.
What they're saying is that the hospital estate, the buildings, many of these are not fit for purpose. They do need to do something to upgrade this hospital, don't they? And both hospitals, Epsom and St Helier.
They certainly do. My house was built about the same time as St Helier. It's had lots of new boilers. It's had lots of roof repairs and re-roofing. St Helier's has been neglected deliberately for at least the last 20 years. And about 5 years ago, the local CCGs gave back £219 million they had on the table to rebuild a whole wing at St Helier where they could have built new wards exactly as they wanted them, their own new specification. And they gave that money back, and the official response when we said, why are you not going through with that? They said it didn't fit in with their long-term plan, i.e. their long-term plan was to remove Epsom and St Helier hospitals, at least as acute hospitals, if not completely.
But if they need to find more money to build new facilities to make upgrades, surely there has to be some way of finding the money. This is one way. Selling off hospital land is a way of finding that money.
It's an extremely short-term way of finding that money. It's like selling your house to buy a new carpet. It's a ridiculous way of finding new money. They are currently, at the moment in St Helier, spending £100 million refurbishing mainly the exterior. They are putting in new A&E departments. They are putting in new maternity departments at St Helier. They're putting in a new boiler at Epsom, new maternity department, new A&E department. And they are intending, it is in their plan, to remove them from one or both within the next couple of years. They are spending lots of money on our hospitals with the knowledge that they are going to rip it all out again within a couple of years. This is not about money, it's about ideology, it's about ruining our National Health Service and encouraging people to pay privately to people who are going to make a huge amount of profit out of people's sickness.
That's Sandra Ash from the Keep Our St Helier campaign.
Campaigners have criticised plans to sell off hospital buildings in Epsom as worse than selling off the family silver. And Theresa May will tell MPs later today that she ordered RAF jets to take part in airstrikes against Syria to alleviate further humanitarian.
If, like us, you think we need to retain the 2 general acute hospitals we already have, you might like to sign our petition at koshh.org/petition. Let's keep our local acute hospital services. Your life may literally depend upon it. Thanks for watching, and please share this video to let more people know about it.